So let me see if I can get going now. Listen, back in 2017, had a week off from work in the fall. It was actually September, and I was supposed to go fish a fishing tournament in South Florida, a week-long inshore fishing tournament. In the morning, my glasses are fogged up. This is gonna be tough. In the morning when I woke up, I felt like the Lord telling me, don't go down there. He says, I want you to go. I felt like he said to go to Houston. And at the time, that day, Hurricane Harvey was hitting Houston. He says, I want you to go over there. And we didn't know at that time that Harvey was gonna sit over Houston for 4 days and dump all this rain. So I got up and I told my wife, she was like, okay, because she gets used to this kind of stuff, and hooked my boat up to my truck, threw some tent, because I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have any connections. So I just made calls while I was on the way over there. It took me about 12 hours because of all the rain to get over there. Finally, that night, I ended up with a fireman staying at his house, and he hooked me up with somebody to kind of crew for my boat. And so we did rescues. In fact, on the first day, we were in Viter. We rescued this old guy. The water was like up to the neck in his house. And he was an older, and we went in there to rescue him. There was a Grammy on the wall. And is it a Grammy for writing music? Turns out he wrote the song It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere for Alan Jackson and Jimmy Buffett. And I was tempted while we were driving with him in the boat to take him to, the rescue trucks that take him to a shelter to go, hey, could you pour me something tall and strong and make it a hurricane before I go insane? Anyway, I didn't do it. The next day, we were riding on our boat through Port Arthur. All the streets are flooded. And there was a man over on this road, and he's waving his hands, for us. So we go over there, and he says, my mother-in-law, she's 87 years old. She's in a wheelchair. She's trapped in her home. Can we go get her? And I said, absolutely. So we got her out of her place and got her back to safety. I got a video of it. I got Pastor Rick, right?
Rick.
From what church?
Rick Irwin from Proctor Baptist Church.
That's his mother-in-law right there.
Church here in Port Arthur, Texas. We got his mother-in-law.
Right.
We just got her out of her place and getting her back to safety.
And we're fixing to pass the church in just a minute.
That's a highway right there.
Thank you, Shoreline Church, for your support.
Absolutely. Wait.
Got it.
So that was really cool. But when we first talked to him, just when he was about to get in the boat, he stopped, he paused, and I'm sure you know where this is going. Before he got in the boat, he says, before I get in the boat, I just need to know, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Right? Because, you just don't get in a boat with anybody. You need to know how they voted, right? No, he didn't care about our politics. You know why? Because it was an emergency. And when it's an emergency, you don't care about that stuff, right? And so as we get into this series, we're doing this series that we've been doing for the year called Heed the Call. I just wanted to talk about, because it just feels like our country's on the verge of a meltdown, doesn't it? I mean, everybody's taking sides, everybody's divided. I mean, we were already divided, and then you brought COVID in, and then it's like, 2 doses, 3 doses, no doses, who knows? I mean, we don't know, right? And I've seen families divide over this, where they're not talking to each other because they're taking a stance on an issue in the culture that's divided our culture. And everybody has an opinion. I mean, you can't even get online and watch a football game without somebody having an opinion about something. Now, here's the problem. My kids and my wife will tell you, I've been known to have an opinion, right? I've been known to have an opinion. Now, this may mean nothing to you, but when you're a pastor, everyone wants to know your opinion on something. Oh, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And sometimes I just want to go, I don't care, bartender, right? See, my problem is I don't mind sharing my opinion with you, even if you don't want to hear it, all right? Just ask all the politicians that all politicians that used to attend our church, right? Not that I bring politics into the church. I actually used to live next door to a county commissioner. It was the worst year of his life, right? I'd be on the dock and I'd watch him coming outside and he'd see me and I go, hey, come back. I want to talk about Crab Island, right? Because we all have an opinion, right? And it seems like everyone is thinking, it's so bad. Our country's so bad. It's going to hell in a handbasket. It's never been, this is what I love this one. It's never been this bad. I'm like, we had a civil war, right? 800,000 men and boys died in that, right? But what if they're right? What if it's never been this bad? And then throw the church and the Christian thing. God is judging America, right? Is God really judging? Is God judging America? God, this is judgment upon America for its sins. All that stuff, and everyone has an opinion, And we all have opinions, but everyone wants to share their opinion, and everyone wants to know my opinion. That sometimes I just want to drive my car into a bridge of Buckman. Did I mess my hair up? All right. You know what movie that's from? Tommy Boy. Come on, you guys. Sit and laugh, but anyway. So I guess so. But sometimes I just don't want to have an opinion. I want to be able to. Sometimes when someone asks me, "What do you think of this?" I just go, "I have no opinion." Right? But there is an opinion that I do have, and I'm going to share it with you. And I think it's a good opinion, regardless of what's going on politically, regardless of who's in office, regardless of what's going on in our culture, our economy. I don't know everything that's happening there, but I do know this, and that my opinion is that as a church and as church people, we have a responsibility. And by we, I mean all of us. I mean Democrat Jesus followers. Yes, there are Democrat Jesus followers. I know we live in a really Republican county, and if you're a Democrat, there are Republican Jesus followers, right? And what I mean collectively, whether we agree on issues or not, whether we're divided or not, we have a responsibility as Christ followers. We have a responsibility as a church. We don't have to know everything. We don't have to know how everything falls into place regarding the Bible. We don't have to have, as it relates to the Bible, we don't have to figure out or know how we're going to solve all the world's problems. We probably could even agree on how to solve the world's problems. I mean, we can hardly agree on how to solve our community's problems, right? Every time you think you have a solution or someone has a solution, there's 50% of the people that are against it. And so we can't even solve our community problems. And I hate to be a bearer of bad news, but we are in church. I am your pastor. I need to tell you the truth. Some of us can't even solve our own problems, right? You know what I'm talking about. I'm sitting on the couch watching TV and going, you know what, I know what I would do if I was president, and I can't even get my own wife to submit to me. She's like, you're darn right. I'm not. So. No, what I'm saying is we're sure that we can solve the world's problems, but yet we're still trying to make it through life. We're still trying to figure out how to make life work for our family. And here's what happens, though, if you look at this long enough and you get so jaded, you get cynical, that it just becomes easy to do nothing and complain about everything. I'm just not going to do anything. But here's the thing. Now, I'm kind of talking to three different groups of people today. If you're here this morning or you're watching online and you're not a Christian, you're not a religious person, you're here because someone dragged you or, you walked away from the faith or whatever. I'm not even suggesting that, I'm not trying to convince you to do something that you don't believe you should do. I mean, really, I have to tell you, this talk might not be really applied to you. I mean, so I'm giving you permission to go shopping on Amazon while we're, okay? And maybe you don't. You want to sit around and watch some of the Christ followers squirm, okay? But maybe the other group of people is maybe you're a Christian as far as what you believe, It kind of your Christianity stops at belief, doesn't go any further. This is what I believe. I believe all the right things. I believe that Jesus died for my sins. I've asked him to come into my heart. I'm going to go to heaven. I got baptized. So, that's good. It stops there. Well, I don't know what you're going to do with this talk, but if you are a Christ follower, you're a Jesus follower, and you've decided, I'm going to live my life in such a way to introduce or reflect the kingdom of God that Jesus brought to the earth. I'm going to live my life like that it reflects that. If that's you, you don't have an option. That's not your option to complain and do nothing, okay? And as a church, that's not our option. We can't choose to do that. It is tempting, and the reason why it's tempting is because of this word right here, awareness. See, once upon a time, and maybe you've connected with people in life, my grandmother grew up in a holler between Ducktown, Tennessee and Copper Ridge, Tennessee. She called it a holler. She never left that holler till she was 17 years old. See, once upon a time, the only things that you were aware of was the things that happened in your vicinity, to your family, your region. The heartache that happened to you, the heartache that happened to people around you, even wars. You didn't experience things that happened all the way around the world. Poverty, sickness, you were only aware of something that was close to you or affected people close to you. But now we, on the other hand, we are aware of everything everywhere because of the internet. And it's overwhelming, isn't it? Now, if we're totally honest, some of us, we've brought a lot of this on ourselves because as a culture, we're just not interested in good news anymore. It's all about bad news. You can't make a living making good news. or finding people. You can't make a living reporting good news. People have tried, it doesn't work. We just need more good news. Good luck with that. Because listen, nobody cares about how many Amtrak trains make it to the station on time. All they care about is the one that derails in the middle of a community and sets everything on fire, right? See, that's just human nature. We hyper-focus on what's happening negatively in the world. That's how you monetize what's going on in the world. So we're just not interested in good news. We hyper-focus on the negative news, and that's just really, it's just human nature. So what some of us have done, some of you have done, and I don't blame you, you shut it out. You just tuned it out. You don't listen to the news anymore. You tune it out. I try to do it. My wife watches the news all the time, so I end up seeing it. And then I get sucked into it. But you ever talk to someone, you go, did you hear about what? And they go, no. What, do you live in a cave? How'd you not hear about that? I don't watch the news anymore. Oh, did you know that we landed on the moon? Not that far back, all right? See, that's one option. In fact, the saying ignorance is bliss, it's kind of like unawareness is bliss. If I'm not aware of it, I'm just gonna live in this state of bliss. But to a Christ follower, a Jesus follower, unawareness is a swing and a miss. See, because I'm not bothered by, I'm not moved by, I'm not inspired to get involved with human suffering or problems or issues, and neither are you, that are not close to us, that we're not aware of. So the tendency is to, we either try to shut it all out or we try to take it all on. And we can't do that either. It's impossible. We can't sit around and complain and do nothing, but we can't take it all on. In fact, our response to what's happening in the world, our response to the things that we see, the issues that we see, the human suffering, the problem, the things going on, not just in the world, but even in our world, our response has been prescribed to us and modeled for us. Our response has been prescribed to us and modeled for us. See, you don't get to choose. If you are a Christ follower, again, if you're not a Christ follower, you're not a Christian, you're not a religious person, you do get to choose. And if you're one of those, because I'm not trying to convince you to do something that you don't believe of in your heart. So if you're not a Christ follower, you get to choose what your response is. If you are one of those where your Christianity stops at what you believe and doesn't really enter into the realm of doing something, I believe all the right things and it's my business what I do with my relationship. Well, you already kind of done your response, so love you, right? But if you're an active Jesus follower, we don't get to pick and choose our response to people's struggles based on what's going on in society, based on what's happening in culture, on what side of the issue that you fall on regarding that problem or, whatever. In fact, if you cruise through the Gospels, if you just cruise through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the story of Jesus' life, you bump into a really disturbing pattern. In fact, it's such a disturbing pattern that some people have actually chosen not to follow Jesus because they look at this pattern. But if you look at, and here's what I mean by this, Jesus, if you cruise through the Gospels, Jesus was all about meeting the immediate needs of people. He's doing something and someone comes up and goes, he's with his disciples and someone says, my son is sick. And Jesus is like, all right, hold on, guys. Let's put this on hold for a minute. I need to go deal with this. Hey, I brought my son to your disciples and he's demonized, throws himself in the fire. Can you do anything? And Jesus says, bring him to me. Jesus was on his way to heal someone's daughter who was sick. And on his way there, a woman who'd been sick for 12 years grabs the hem of his robe and Jesus stops and ministers to her on his way to minister to someone else. So he was constantly responding to the needs of the people, constantly responding to emergencies. He fed thousands of people on multiple occasions. But here's what's odd. Here's what's even disturbing. You know what he didn't do? If you cruise through the Gospels, you know what he didn't do? He never permanently solved any of society's problems. Think about this. You don't believe me? Go check. None of them. He never permanently, in fact, all through the Gospels, he refused to be dragged into debates about how to fix the system. How do we get rid of this occupying government? How do we get rid of Rome? How do we create a messianic government that dispels the outsiders? And so all those things that were systemic problems in society, he had nothing to say about them. I mean, he never even attempted to address those things, much less fix them. Yet, he was always concerned about human condition. He was always concerned about the immediate needs of humanity. And what that means to me is that Jesus came not to solve society's problems, but to point out the root cause of those problems, to point out the root cause of the human condition. In fact, one of those times he tells us what the root cause is, found in Matthew chapter 15. He says, in Matthew chapter 15, he says, for out of the heart, so he's talking about the human heart, he says, come evil thoughts, all right? Out of the heart come evil thoughts. So, and the first one, he says murder. So what he's saying is, you don't just wake up in one morning and decide that you're gonna do a random shooting, okay? He says it starts with the heart, with the thoughts that are going on in the heart. Somewhere you get to a point where you are so enraged that you take a life, whether it be from passion or from whatever it is. He says, come murder, adultery. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, it's a beautiful fall day, I think I'll have an affair. It starts with thoughts in the heart. Sexual immorality, sexual abuse, he says it starts in the heart. Theft, false, and some of it, white collar theft, blue collar theft. Some of you had your childhood stolen. Some of you had a marriage stolen, the first one or a second one. False testimony, slander. See, our problems, your problems, society's problems, our problems, they stem from this is what Jesus is saying, they stem from our sinful, selfish, appetite-driven human condition of the heart. And no system, no political platform, nothing is going to be able to solve it. In fact, there are no perfect solutions to problems that involve people. You know why? Because people are involved in both the problems and the solutions. Kind of sounds like government, doesn't it? Right? I've heard somebody say, why do we need government? Because people can't self-govern themselves. So we're gonna put people who can't self-govern themselves to govern us who can't govern, right? The reason why there's no solutions is because they all involve people. Now, that doesn't mean we don't work for solutions. It doesn't mean we don't vote for people that we think have the best idea. But at the end of the day, I think it just kind of feels like we're rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. When the root problem is the human condition, when the root problem is the condition of the heart, it's deeper and more fundamental. In fact, this is why Jesus didn't deal with the Romans, because he knew one day the Romans wouldn't be the problem, but the human heart would still be there. It's the condition of the heart and government. Remember what I said a couple weeks ago? I said this a couple weeks ago. The basic fundamental role of government is to tell you how low you can go before you go to jail, right? This is the role of government, right? Is tell you how low, because if we can't self-govern ourselves, then what the government says, well, here's some guardrails to keep you out of prison, right? So if I can't self-govern myself, they're gonna govern it for me, but can the government teach me how to be a wonderful person? Probably not. Can the government teach us how to be generous? No. See, it was the things that Jesus modeled and then attempted to teach his disciples and his followers. He knew that that's the kind of attitude, this new kingdom that he was introducing was gonna change the world, regardless of what government was in power, regardless of who was elected, regardless of what side of any issue you find yourself on. Jesus came to introduce a new way of living, an upside down way of living, a inside out way of living, a backwards way of living, a way of living that races to be at the back of the line, not at the front of the line, an attitude that says, how can I put others first? A living where the question is, how can I do the right thing with the influence and the power and the resources that I have? Instead of feeling guilty about how blessed we are when it comes to the rest of the world, instead, what if I was responsible for what I have? Not feeling guilty for how God's blessed me, but how can I be more responsible? Because it's not mine anyway, right? In fact, Jesus would say, listen, everything that you have, all your opportunities, all your talent, all your physical possessions is a loan from God. And when you understand that and begin to embrace that way of thinking, what you'll do is you'll take your possessions, you'll take your talents, and you'll take your resources, and this is what Jesus would say, and you will use it to benefit others just the same way that I came to earth and used my talent, my resources, my power, and my position to benefit you. And see, this was a new way of thinking, this new kingdom that was introduced by a new king that didn't ask his followers to give their lives for him, which is what most kings did, but instead this new king gave his life for his followers first, which was, by the way, it was called the way. It wasn't called Christianity, it was called the way, because Jesus said, I am the way. So here's this new kingdom. You're like, what does it look like, Jesus? And Jesus is like, it looks like me. Everything you see me doing, this is what this kingdom looks like. How does this kingdom act, Jesus? It acts like me. If you've seen me, I've came to reveal what the Father is like. So if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And if you've seen the Father, you've seen this new kingdom, which is totally contrary to our nature. It's contrary to your nature, contrary to my nature. And this new kingdom was fueled by a single command that is forever relevant. A command that was given to us 2,000 years ago, but it's still life-changing, has the potential to change the world, change culture, in spite of how culture in the world changes. And he was sitting around on the last night with his disciples, and he says, here's the new command I'm giving you, okay? It's not an addition. It's not the command 11. It's the new command. And the new command is this, that you are to love others as I've loved you. We are to love others as he's loved us. Jesus, what does this new kingdom look like? Simple. Love others the way I've loved you. Simple, profound, brilliant. And you know what else it is? It is so relevant to us as we heed the call, because this new command that he says, this New Testament ethic to love one another as Jesus has loved us, is actually it is the bridge between our offenses. It is the bridge. This command allows us to bridge the gap in culture, no matter which side of an issue you're on. Loving others as Christ has loved you is the bridge that bridges us between our between our different backgrounds and our different life experiences and how we think problems should be solved and our disagreements on how things should be addressed. He says that's the bridge between those gaps that we so struggle with. To put others first, to bear another's burdens, that we could come up to someone and say, even though I don't see the world the way you do, even though I didn't vote the way you did, even though I didn't experience the same experiences I've never walked in your shoes. How can I help you bear your burden? Even though we might not ever agree, even though we might not ever vote alike, how can I put you first? How can I go to the back of your line? In fact, Jesus' last act of service before he went to the cross, before he was arrested, what did he do? He washed the disciples' feet. And if you remember this moment, it was just before, it was during Passover. And I don't know if you know about it. I mean, think about this. We read the Bible, we read through scripture, and we go, and Jesus washed the disciples' feet. Do you know how long it probably took to wash 12 pairs of feet that were dirty, right? They were dirty, right? And in fact, when he was washing their feet, they were probably humiliated because they knew it was something they should have done. I mean, it was probably one of their responsibilities, one of the 12 disciples, to get a feet washer. And then they didn't do, they show up, the feet washer's there. I mean, the feet washer's not there, the servant, but there's the basin and there's the pitcher and there's the water. But I'm not doing it. Let Peter do it. I'm not doing it. Let John do it. I'm not doing it. And then they finally sit down, and I just can imagine. In fact, on their way to Passover, they're arguing about who's going to be Jesus' number 2 and who's going to be Jesus' number 3. They just didn't get it, right? And Jesus walks in, the king, introducing this new kingdom, looks around, says, all right, let me show you how this new kingdom looks, and takes off his robe, and he gets on his hands and knees, and he washes the feet of these 12 disciples. And see, the point of that night was, he washed their feet even though they were about to get dirty again. I'm gonna explain that in a minute, but he washed their feet even though they were about to get dirty. And just imagine, being there, all just quiet. And all I can hear is the sound how long does it take to wash 12 feet or 24 feet, right? All I can hear the sound is the wash of the water and the rag, just sloshing. No one says anything because they're humiliated except for Peter. And it's like, no, you're not gonna wash me. So I have to. You can't be in a part of it. Okay, give me a sponge bath. Shut up, Peter. Right? It was so humiliating. And he puts his robe, his rabbinical robe back on. He sits down at his place in the table and he says, now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. See, even though they were going to get dirty again, see, he wasn't trying to solve the problem of dirty feet. He could have went, hey, I got a better idea than wearing sandals in the Middle East. What if we invented socks and then shoes, and we would never have to wash feet again? He wasn't about solving that problem, okay? He wasn't trying to solve the problem of dirty feet. He was about meeting an immediate need. And then he says, I have set you as an example that you should do as I've done for you. And that, my friends, is our marching orders. This is a simple application to that command. Love others as I've loved you. What does that look like? Here, let me show you. I'm gonna start. I'll wash your feet. And as I've washed your feet, so you should wash one another's feet. In other words, that there would be nothing too low for you. There'd be nothing that's beneath you. Because Jesus says, because I, your master, have washed your feet, so you should wash one another's feet. And what I think hung in that moment is washing their feet did not solve their problems. Washing their feet dressed their current need. See, it didn't solve their problems, it dressed their current need. And this is so important. Commanding them to wash one another's feet ensured that their differences would not divide them. And you know why? You can't wash feet from a distance. The further you are away from a problem, the simpler the solution seems to appear. I didn't say this in the first service, but we hear about shootings in our country all the time. And sometimes you get numb to it. But now when you know the family that has experienced a random shooting and a loss of a son, it becomes a lot more complex, doesn't it? See, when you're close, you have to address the complexity. You have to address the baggage. When you're close, you have to address someone else's problems and the challenges and the issues that they face. You're suddenly exposed. When you're suddenly exposed to what happens and not look at it from a distance, you experience what I call an oh moment. Oh, all this time that I thought that I had no idea. I just assumed people like you. Now that I'm closer, now that I hear your story, now that I understand your background, it's inescapable to me because I looked at it as just division, and now I see there's not as much division as I thought. Yeah, we may disagree, but how can I help you carry your burden? See, the closer we get to problems the closer we get to people, the closer we understand their current reality. And when you understand someone's reality, you're less critical and you're less cynical. I have it all figured out sitting there watching TV and if the president would just do this. That's easy because the farther away a problem is, the less complicated it appears to be. And so Jesus says to the men that night who are about to steward this cause, this to be the stewards of the gospel for this generation, he's like, guys, look, you're gonna disagree, you're gonna get in arguments with each other, but if you will wash each other's feet, that's gonna keep you close. It'll keep you from being divided. And they got the message. History shows they got the message. Greeks, Romans, Jews, the entire Roman Empire would embrace this new kingdom, this new way of thinking, because hearts were changed. And when hearts were changed, culture was changed. The empire that was responsible, the very empire responsible for crucifying Jesus, eventually embraced him. Because why? Hearts were changed. And then when hearts were changed, culture begins to change. And the world became a different place for men, for women, for children, for slaves, for the poor. See, this is the call that we are to heed. This is what we're called to do. And this is what the church accomplishes when we get this right. When we refuse to be driven by divisions in our culture, when we refuse to be driven by our differences, and we get out of our bubbles and we go out of our way and we close the gap, not so that we all agree, but so that there will be unity among us as far as because listen, government's not gonna solve it, Republicans are not gonna solve it, Democrats are not gonna solve what's going on in the human heart. And our problems will be more easily solved when we come together and get close to the problem, because then the information is on the table and we actually know what we're talking about and we actually know who we're talking to. So we can't shut it out and we can't take it all on. It's impossible to take it all on. In fact, you will get a martyr complex if you try to take it all on. Jesus did not lead us into either ditch, okay? Here's what he said: do for others what you could wish that you, well, he didn't say this, but this is how we apply it. Do for others what we wish we could do for everyone. And so for the best of our ability, within our context, individually and collectively, let's do what we can do. And let's do what we can do now, and let's do what we can do together. So, twice a year, we talk about what we call initiatives. Usually around February and March, we talk about our initiatives that are gonna bring us through the summertime. And then once this year. Now you think, what are initiatives? Initiatives are our way of saying, here are the things that we wanna focus on. Here are the things that we wanna accomplish by the end of our year to fulfill our mission. It's like the last half of the game or the last quarter of the game. We're coming together and going, look, we have a mission. This is what we started out doing. And this is our initiatives to help us accomplish what we believe that God has called us to accomplish. And it involves giving, it involves serving, and it involves loving. And we are to do it in our home, which would be this place here, our community, which is the surrounding area, and our world. It's an opportunity to say to our world and to our community that people, everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. Think about that. Everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. And the reason we do this is because of a passage of scripture that the Apostle Paul wrote to a young pastor named Timothy. And Timothy was pastoring a church, and he was a young man. And Paul says, Timothy, while you're pastoring people, command those who are rich in this present world, which means us, to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. And the truth is, most of us are rich. Now, you may not feel rich in regards to your neighborhood, or you may not feel rich in regards to your job or whatever, but in light of what's happening over the world, all over the world, and even in our culture, we are reminded of how much we have. We are reminded of how blessed we have. And like I said in the beginning, don't feel guilty about how blessed you are. You should feel responsible for how blessed you are. So Paul says, Timothy, you gotta tell them. They might be rich, but don't put their trust in money, but instead be rich in good deeds and be generous and willing to share. And so that's what he's telling us. We've got to be rich in good deeds and generous and willing to share. Now, like Stephen, when he was up here, you guys are generous all year long. I'm not coming to you and saying, you need to be more generous. No, that's not the issue. I am so proud of you. I have never been a part of a church that's this generous. But again, this is just the time that we huddle up because summer's over. We fed 4,000 people over the summertime. We did Crab Island. We sent kids to camp. Okay, now it's time to huddle up and go, okay, how are we gonna finish out the year? Okay, we got 3 or 4 months left. This is how we're gonna finish it out. This is how we're gonna direct our good deeds and our generosity. Excuse me, so that together we make a huge impact. So, let's go through our 2023 initiatives. This is how we're gonna finish the year. Now, if you want, you can also, on our app, there's a place where you can connect to these initiatives, or if you look on the seat in front of you, you can take your phone and just put it right up there, kind of open your phone, and it'll go right to our initiatives. So let's look at our initiatives that we wanna finish out the year, and we're gonna do it by giving, by serving, and by loving, and inviting. First of all, we're gonna heed the call. Everything we want you to pray. Everything that we talk about, let's pray, because revolution starts with me. We're gonna ask you to invite. We've got an amazing thing coming up that is gonna be a powerful, powerful tool for you to invite. You can sit with me, we give our first and our best, and serve, because we are what we're part of is bigger than the part we play. So let's look at our first initiatives. This is for our community, serving our community between now and Christmas. In October, we have a serve day coming up where we serve. We've done over 108 projects last year, 3 different cities, served 180 organizations over the time that we've done this. And we just go out on a Saturday and we serve with no strings attached. Another thing coming up, you'll see Crop Drop. This is right before Thanksgiving. We have given away 100,000 pounds of produce 6,000 families fed, 88 shoreliners have served in that. It's just we unload all of these trucks for people and they can come in, they pull up in their car. It's a great thing to bring your family out. So we need you to serve there. We need you to serve in Serve Day. Bikes or bus, that's a thing that we used to be involved in. It's done by 98 Country, and they do a big weekend thing, first weekend of December over at Uptown Station. They have 98 hours where they do this drive to raise as many bikes for underprivileged kids as possible. They said every time Shoreline is involved, they double their amount of bikes. So we have already given towards that, and we would love you to give, which you can wait till then. You can give money and just we'll buy the bike, or you can buy a bike and take down there, or 2 or 3, and it's fun to serve down there because it's a good time. College football's on. They're down there for a whole weekend. And then one of my favorites, Tierney Secret Santa. 65 families were blessed with Christmas gifts last year. What we do is we go, an organization run by Dr. Rich Hughes, they pay off layaways for single mom families. They find layaways at Walmart. They have a lot of toys, and they just pay it off to 1 penny. Then they have to come down and they pay it. So that's awesome, and you can give towards that. Let's look at our home. Our home, this is our church. We're making a difference in the city we love. If you look in the middle, Christmas at Shoreline. We need you to give, serve, and invite. Now, you might be thinking, why are we talking about Christmas in December? Because anybody remember last year when we did Chronicles of Narnia? Remember how we have to start planning it now. And this is going to be a great time to invite people. In fact, here's a preview of our Christmas series.
It would have been better if I'd never been born at all.
What'd you say?
I said I wish I'd never been born.
You've got your wish. You've never been born. A chance to see what the world would be like without you. You have no identity.
Oh, what do you mean, no identity? My name's George Bailey.
There is no George Bailey.
Now, here's what's cool. I don't know if you know this, but they're supposed to be re-releasing a new version of this movie this Christmas. So we'll be right on that. So we are going to turn this room into Bedford Falls. And Graham is probably going to be George Bailey's. Well, I don't know, Clarence. That seems kind of unusual to me, right? And listen to this. All the parades, see the parades up there? They're all going to be part of pushing people towards Shoreline. We already have some Model A and Model T Fords that have been donated that we can use in the parade. We're gonna dress up like George Bailey and invite people, and we're doing the Christmas boat parade, inviting people to Shoreline. So that's how, and now you go, what that does is that impacts people's lives because they come in here and we change their perception of God by changing their perception of church. And then, are you blind? And anyway, I love you. Just half blind, right? Anyway, all right, and then lastly, our world. We have a pastor's retreat starting tomorrow on 30A. We've got pastors coming in from different parts of the country where we're gonna minister to them. And it's the impact that you are making, your church. I mean, there's churches across the country that you're making an impact in. We have a team going to Uganda in October. And the team that's going to Uganda, we're going to our city. There's a city, basically Lugazi, that we have adopted. We've built a school there. And now we're going back and we're sending a team over to see what other initiatives that we can accomplish next year there. And then the same thing, we have a team going to Indonesia in November. And these are the goals that we need to raise: 50,000 for Uganda, 11,000 for Indonesia. We're going over in November, and that is going to result, it's kind of a recon, is going to result in a trip that's open to other people sometime next year, because we're going to rebuild the Indo Youth Center. Because after COVID, things have just fallen in disrepair, and it's time to get back in there and make an impact in this primarily Muslim, Hindu, and Muslim country. So, listen, Jesus made it very clear. Devotion to God is best demonstrated and authenticated through love for others. It's not our church attendance. It's not the prayers that we pray. It's not even what we believe about God, but our love for other people. And our irrational generosity towards people is the most appropriate response to God's irrational generosity to us. If you love God, that's what you do. So let's show the world, let's show our community that we're not just about songs and lights and smoke, and that our faith is actually about doing and not just believing. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your word. And not just your word, well, your word, you sent him, he became flesh and set for us an example of washing the feet for the disciples. And then he set a bigger example in that he gave his life as a ransom for all of us. And then said that we are to do likewise. Lord, we cannot deny the irrational generosity and love and grace that you've displayed towards us. And the most appropriate response is to turn around and whether it be giving, serving, inviting, but making that impact in someone else's life. Lord, that someone will have a good Thanksgiving because of the food that's given away. That there's students in Uganda that can read and get an education and change their country. Lord, that even someone can walk in here at Christmas time because of all the irrational, generous people in here who've given and they've served and they've worked hard in order to present the message of Jesus in a compelling way, that they don't just walk out with a good feeling, but they walk out with a new life. God, we're so grateful. We love you. Thank you for bringing us on this mission. In Jesus' name, amen. So don't